All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming today. We're doing it a bit differently than we've done in the past. We wanted to talk about Operation Safe Summer, and we're close to the quarter, so we've tried to consolidate some of the data and just give you a sense of where we are as far as crime status for our city, and just go from there. So the first thing I want to talk about is, while we have a lot of great work that we did in Operation Safe Summer, the last 5 days have been very significant for our city. We had 5 murders in 5 days. Here are the names. Some of these names of the victims we'll be releasing for the first time today. But on the 15th, we had a murder of Antoine Christian in Fairfield Court. The following day, the 16th, Lavon Page was killed on Drury Street, and that's a case where we were able, thanks to the great work of some of the officers in the room today, we were able to take the suspect into custody within minutes after the shooting. So that case has been cleared. Then the following day, Malachi Dunbar, the youngest of our victims, was killed over on Willoughby Court. And then on the 19th, we had 2 homicides, and that is Terrell Hancock on 1500 block of Mechanicsville was killed, and then hours later, Tyrone Fleming, age 51, was killed on Overlook. At this point, we don't have any connections to any of these cases. There's various, the detectives, I'm being briefed on it on a daily basis. At this point, we don't believe they're connected, but that could obviously change. But different motives, different spasm is basically a spasm of violence over the last week that is very concerning to us, and we're taking steps to try to address it. And we can talk about that afterwards, but I'll go through the presentation. So Operation Safe Summer took place between June 10th and September 8th, and you see the partners listed there that we certainly worked with: the FBI, ATF, Richmond Police, Virginia State Police, the U.S. Marshals, DEA, and certainly our partners in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and the U.S. Attorney's Office. So here's a number. During the same time frame, one of the things we like to talk about is the threshold. So going back to 2017, these are the violent crime numbers as compared during the same time period in each year. So the highest in the last 7 years was in 2019, which was a bit surprising to us, where we had 343 violent crimes. And this year is the lowest in the 7-year period. So 286 total violent crimes during the same time period that we're talking about, June 10th through September 8th. So positive numbers, which I think reflect the hard work of the men and women that are behind you today. And here's when we break down those individual crimes and thresholds as well. The highest number for murder during the same time period was 26 in 2021. And obviously that is double to what we had during the same time period, which was 13. And I want to be really clear, when I talk about these numbers, I'm fully aware that each of these numbers represents a human being, a member of our community that's no longer with us. So I'm not trying to be flippant with it, but it is important for us to know the data. And same thing with our non-fatal shootings. We had 51, which is one of the stories of this year in general, but also with this operation. So 51, the hot, which is a low compared to 2020, where we saw 99. 76 robberies versus the high in 2018 of 120, and then the overall aggravated assaults 182 versus the high in 2019. So good numbers overall for us for this summer for that same time period. And one of the other things we like to look at when we talk about gun violence, there's 3 major things we track. That's gun-related murders, aggravated assaults where a person's shot but not killed, and robberies where a person's shot but not killed. And when we look at those compared to the same time frame last year, we were at 90 in 2022. We saw a significant spike in aggravated assaults, and down to 63 of those same events. So a 30% reduction over this for the summer operation we had last year to this year when we combine those 3 gun-related crimes. Here's some of just the sheer numbers. 214 felony arrests, 137 misdemeanor arrests, 278 warrants served, and just some of the numbers on the drugs that we seized. And obviously the most concerning of those drugs are fentanyl. We know that fentanyl accounts for the majority of our fatal overdoses. It's something that is affecting our nation as a whole. We think fentanyl is driving the crisis in fatal overdoses and other deaths of despair. This year to date, 142 people have died in our city from overdoses, and the majority of those we believe are fentanyl related. So that is a significant importance to us to try to limit the exposure of fentanyl to our community members. Something I talk about often is Glock switches or auto sears. These are devices that are put on a traditional Glock like the one I'm wearing right now and turns it from a semi-automatic pistol into essentially a machine gun. The team behind you sees 10 of those devices and took them off of individuals with guns. And that's where we think we save a lot. Everyone we can get off the streets is important, but we're saving a lot of those multiple victim shootings by taking those devices off the streets. You know, just sheerly a numbers game. The more we take off the streets, the less victims we're going to have in our streets. And then 176 firearms total seized. $61,683 in cash was seized through asset forfeiture. And I'm just going to go through some photographs of some of the guns, some of the hardware that we took off the streets during this operation. As you can see, many of these are rifles with high-capacity magazines. These are just a sample. They're not all of them. The other thing that we tried to do with Operation Safe Summer was be flexible to the needs of our community when it comes to violent crime. So many of you reported on the fact that Bird Park robbery series that we had, where we had 4 robberies in a 10-day period in July. The men and women behind you flexed their schedules, worked with the precinct detectives in 3rd Precinct, came up with a plan to address that. We had 2 juveniles, aged 15 and 17, that were later arrested for 4 of those robberies. We seized a firearm from that individual, and since that arrest, we have not seen any similar robberies in that area with the same MO. So effectively solving that problem, which was a huge concern. And a big part of the success of that operation was the seizure, was the arrest of those individuals with the help of our community members who provided us with video, who provided us with other information to help us be successful. We flexed the schedules to fit the pattern where we saw the robberies occurring, and we were able to make an arrest. Very similar to something else I reported out last month on were Oak Grove and Belmead. We had an individual who was prowling our neighborhood, those 2 neighborhoods, and entering homes in some cases, knocking on doors. Between July 1st and August 7th, we had 25 reported events. Not all those were B&Es, but they were reported incidents from our community who were capturing things on their cameras and sharing that with us. So on August 29th, we arrested a juvenile for that, and he's facing currently numerous charges as it's related to that specific crime. But that was very concerning to us, not only for our community members, but we knew that if this young man went into the wrong house, that he was likely to be shot by a homeowner. So we felt like we were in a race for time to come to a successful conclusion on that case. And again, the men and women behind you flexed their schedules between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. when we were seeing these crimes and stayed out there until we came to a successful conclusion. I'm very proud of that. We also, with the U.S. Marshals, partnered in Operation Timeout from August 21st to the 23rd, where we identified lists of fugitives for our community. 32 individuals were arrested on 75 separate warrants. That took place over the course of 3 days. Something else I talk about often is the fact that we have many stolen guns in our community, stolen out of cars, stolen out of homes, and guns that have ended up in the hands of our youth. Through a grant funding, we were able to purchase 105 safes, and we provided those to community members almost exclusively where people were coming to us and saying, I have a firearm on my home, and I don't have a way to secure it, to keep it out of the hands of a person that shouldn't have access to it, and almost always those are children. And I think that's a very successful program. It should be bipartisan when we look at gun safety. Safely storing your firearms are a big part of us We also talk about the fact that Marquand Nash was killed, I should say, earlier in this year accidentally with a stolen firearm that was unsecured in the car. So we try to think outside the box and find ways we could support our community in making sure that guns don't get in the hands of people that shouldn't have access to them. Another part of our plan was the second gun buyback, where we partner with Liberation Church and Richmond residents. This year we seized 250 firearms. All of them were operational, and we found it to be very successful this year. Trying to give youth a safe place this summer to be, I think, was an important part of the strategy from a city perspective. So we partner with Parks and Rec to provide security at the Gill Center, as well as at the former George Wythe Gymnasium. And you can see the amount of youth that participated in that during those key hours on the weekends where they were most at risk of being hurt. Another part of our strategy is getting out and interacting with members of our community. We'll be doing that again tonight. So part of the summer, we were in Union Hill, Brookside Apartments, Chippenham Townhomes, and tonight we will be in Northern Barton Heights neighborhood. You're all invited if you'd like to stop by and walk that community with us and Captain Gardner to discuss some of the specific challenges to that neighborhood. Our community pop-up events. Last month we had one in Creighton Court. In 2 weeks we'll be back in Southwood. That is a very large apartment complex in the south side of Richmond that experiences a lot of different challenges, including property and violent crime. So we'll be out there next week with our partners having an event. And you're all invited to that too. That's September 28th at 5 p.m. So now to go to the year-to-date crime stats. So overall, violent crime is down 7%. Aggravated assaults are down 14%, and robberies are down 1%. That's the good news. Where we're, and the significant event that I've already spoken to is our non-fatal shootings. When we combine robbery shootings and aggravated assault shootings, this year, or last year at this time, we were at 187. We're at 138 for a 26% reduction in those gun violence. And I want to be really clear about that. Murders get a lot of our attention, and that is obviously what we're most concerned about, but all of these are attempted murders, almost exclusively. Very rarely do we have someone try to shoot someone in the foot or something like that. These are all potential murders, and they're either spared by the fact that the skill of the surgeons at our great hospitals or just sheer luck in the angle of the wounds. So it's a really important, this is a very big indicator on where we're at crime-wise. And here's some of the bad news. So at this time, and this is even worse because it doesn't include the last two. We pulled these numbers on Monday. But 16% up in homicide, 27% up in rapes, and robbery commercials, which are trending down this quarter, but over year on year, year to date, we're up 6%. But something I want to, and I forgot to mention this going back. So last year we had 18 juvenile victims at this time of non-fatal shootings. This year we have 16. Last year we had 3 juveniles who were killed, and this year we have one 17-year-old who was killed earlier in the year. Property crime is a mixed bag. So very good reductions in arson, burglary, so all of our burglaries are trending down, and our theft from motor vehicle parts and accessories, which are almost exclusively the catalytic converters that we talk about at length. That problem is getting much better with legislation as well as our focus on it. So for a 53% reduction. When you look at those numbers, they're big numbers which drive our crime, our property crime. But what's off the charts are shoplifting, theft from motor vehicle, which is always historically a problem for us, and then motor vehicle theft, which is well publicized. Almost the biggest jump when we look at that is in Kias and Hyundais, which are stolen. And those, we thought we had basically addressed motor vehicle theft in this city and in the country. It was very hard to hotwire a car. So the car thefts that we had previously, you would see me up here talking about the fact don't leave the keys in the car, for God's sake, don't leave your car running. That was always our push to the public, but now we're seeing it with certainly those Kias and Hyundais that it's very easy to steal, and there's TikTok challenges, which are driving this crime, and if you Google it, you'll see it's a problem in all of our urban environments. And it's something that is very difficult for us to address. And those two crimes alone, if we were just on pace where we were in shoplifting last year at this time and on pace where we were with motor vehicle thefts, we'd have an overall reduction in 5% in all of our crime. But now you see a 6% reduction in overall major crime, and it's driven by those two crimes specifically. That's the difference this year. So one of the ways we're trying to address that, and this isn't a panacea either, but we've gotten a grant for wheel locks, commonly referred to as the club. We've distributed all those at our precincts. We're putting those out to our community members, and we're encouraging people to buy them. That seems to be the only thing that can stop the motor vehicle thefts at this point. Now, the problem for us statistically is even the ones that whether it's different cars or even different years that aren't affected by this malfunction, there's still people breaking steering columns and attempting it. So we capture that stat even if someone only attempts to steal a car. So it's really, really challenging for us, and we're hoping to be able to put those wheel locks out there and deter this next time, but it's very challenging. One thing I just wanted to mention, it's National Suicide Awareness Month. 21 Richmonders died at their own hands this year. That's a little bit down from last year. I think we're at 23 at this time last year, but it's totally an avoidable situation, and we just want to highlight that you can call 911 if you're feeling that way, or call 988 if you're having suicidal thoughts. So September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and we just wanted to get that word out there as well. And finally, we're going to be announcing, we don't have locations picked, but we have these dates of our public safety town hall meetings, where not only will the police department be, we will also have just members of the Richmond Fire Department, Public Works, Richmond Ambulance Authority, all talking about public safety concerns for the city. Those will take place in October. There will be one in South Side, one in North Side, one in the West End, and one in the East End, to be determined where those locations take place. So that's what I've got. I'm happy to answer a few questions if we have any. Okay, Melissa?
Hi, Chief. How are you?
Very good.
Thank you for that presentation. I wanted to ask a question that's unrelated, specific to the escaped inmate from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm sure you're aware I've been asking questions from people that watch us, people who live in the city, that live near that hospital, who told me they were very concerned that they did not receive an alert about this escapee, in the hours after the escape, and he actually ended up robbing a Richmonder's home. So they're wondering, are you planning on doing anything different if something like this happens in the future that's in a neighboring jurisdiction, but it's right over the line from the city?
Well, I think that's where there was a bit of a disconnect. If this had taken place in the city, we felt it would have met the criteria for Code Red, but I take your point in the sense that it was on the border and it did affect one of our residents. So that's something we've talked about internally, making sure that not only do we let Henrico Police, Virginia State Police, DOC put out information on their social media, which reaches many people, but there is a like a reverse 911 that we think in the future, if we have an incident like that, we'll make the decision to push that out to our community, because I've heard that as well. So I think it is an opportunity for us to maybe, we might not have that in our policy, but sometimes we get stuck in policy and choose not to just kind of think through what the actual problems are, because there were members of our community that were unaware, and obviously that person is a dangerous man and did break into one of our residents' homes.
So it sounds like going forward, you will consider sending out an alert in a situation
Yes.
like that?
Yes. Tyler, come on. I know. I know it's coming.
Well, I'll ask an on-topic question here first.
Okay, great.
Surprise. So you mentioned, obviously, the 5 homicides in the last 5 days. You said that you were taking steps to address the recent gun violence. Could you talk a little bit more about what that is? Are you seeing any trends in any of these recent gun violence incidents, where they happened or who they involved, that need to be addressed?
Well, it's taking place in 2 of our precincts. So 1st and 2nd precinct are where the most recent 5. But as I said, We're putting those casings through our NIVA machine. We're not seeing connections at this time to see if the same guns were involved. There are different working theories and motives that we're hearing from our major crimes division, but again, it's very early, but we're not, and when we look at the ages, you saw all the way from 19-year-old to a 63-year-old involved, different victims, different lifestyles, so unfortunately, we do have these, as I mentioned before, spasms of violence that we really don't have a good handle on right now, but what we're trying to do is focus on those particular areas as we always do.
Okay. Can you give an update on officer vacancies right now? Are you still struggling to retain or recruit officers?
Yes, we are. I don't have those specific numbers, but one thing that I talked about, I think, at our last press conference was the hire back program. So we just signed off on 4 retired officers who've come back and are going to be sworn as police officers to work in a part-time capacity. Just signed off on another packet today. So that is a stopgap for us to try to fill some of those roles that we have urgent needs on. But I'm telling you, the solution has to be getting young people interested in this career again, and working in an urban environment, which is a challenge. So it's something that we're doing. I'm going to take this opportunity to everyone in blue back there knows that if they can recommend someone who ends up getting hired, we will pay them a bonus. They get $500 the minute that person's hired, and then $500 after they graduate the academy. So that's the plan to address it going forward. We have to get more people in the door without lowering our standards. So 8 or 9 of the packets that reach my desk, I'm still declining, and that's based upon the recommendations of the people in the chain of command and looking through everyone's background investigations. So what I'm not willing to do is simply accept anyone. We've seen where that can go horribly wrong, and police departments have felt the pressure to just staff it with anyone. So we're still holding our same standards. What we have to do is widen the pool. And we're looking for ways to reach out, partner with our universities. We're recruiting at military stations where I think there's a natural fit. But one of the fits that I'm really interested in, some of our best officers come from the private sector, people that are in a job that they're just not pleased with, or they're just bored with, and they want to have a meaningful career. And God knows if you come to this city and you work for this police department, you're going to have meaning in your life. So that's what I would say to everyone who has an inkling that they're not quite happy in their career, to give us a consideration.
And you said, you got to get people interested in doing this job. Why do you think people are not interested in this work?
Well, I think there's you can go down 64 and see, all the signs for sign-on bonuses for HVAC repair and teachers and all kinds of jobs. So I think there is 2020 kind of changed, going through COVID, how people consider the workplace, and they want certain things. And the problem for us in law enforcement is we can't work remotely. That's always a question. And we have shift schedules. Yeah, you guys can't work remotely. That is. And if you start with the police department, you are going to go to an evening or night shift in the beginning. We in our police department, based upon seniority, you get to a day shift and have a more normal life. So it's a challenging life to be a police officer, particularly in an urban environment. So we're fighting that. We're seeing that our numbers of applications are going up. I think the last count was 74%. Jody, is that about right? So we're seeing more of those pool. We had a great group come in last Saturday and test, and all of them passed the test, so they're moving on to the process. So we're very excited about that. We hope to have a big academy class, but to build it back, it's going to be a challenge because, as we fill those roles, I have people that are ending their career, people that are in the drop, or people that are ending their 25 years and they're going on to do something else. So it's a constant challenge. And it's going to be a long-term challenge for us.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. I've lived in the city of Richmond, Virginia since 1974. I have encountered one negative contact with a police officer, and at that time, it was resolved. And so I do want to commend you. And I am a little police officer in my neighborhood. I just want to thank you for all that you do.
Thank you for that.
Are you getting more feedback from the community in helping solve crimes? You had mentioned in our town hall last month that building that relationship, getting that, removing the fear factor from community members.
Well, that's a good point, Bill, because when I look at, we talk about technology a lot, we talk about innovative tactics as far as solving crimes, and our homicide clearance rate, I think, is 63%, the IBR clearance rate today, which is above the national average, and we're very proud of that, and our detectives are working every day to improve that. But there's this misnomer that we're solving cases on forensics, and like I said, that's part of it, but a big part of it is having community members be willing to tell us what they know. And we're seeing that again this year, but it's a constant work in progress. So that's why I think that there is not just the men and women behind you, Operation Safe Summer, a big part of that was enforcement strategies. But as you see too, a big part of it is looking for innovative ways to solve problems like the safe giveaways, like the community walks, like the pop-up events. Getting people to know their police department when there's not crime scene tape up is so important, because when the crime scene tape's up, everyone's emotions are high, everyone is excited. When they get to know us one-on-one and they realize that this uniform may look a bit intimidating, it may make us look like robots, but at the end of the day, we're fathers, we're mothers, we're brothers and sisters, we're just human beings like everyone else. And when we can break down those walls, that's where we're gonna learn things and solve cases. So I'm pleased with where we're at on the homicide clearance rate, but we obviously it's a constant work in progress.
I remember you guys ran out of both the gun safes and then I think also the steering wheel locks. Are you guys planning on restarting any of those initiatives or continuing any of the ones that were also successful this summer?
Yes, so Albert and I just spoke about that. Deputy Chief Stokes and I spoke about that. We're looking for funding for that. That was a very popular program. And it may sound odd, but we also want all of our officers who are on patrol. We have some really cool stories where officers were at situations where they see a gun in a home and this person doesn't have enough money to secure it. And there's no crime that's been committed, but the officer has called their precinct commander and said, hey, this lady needs a safe. Let's secure this weapon. So there's all those kind of stories that I think if we can save one child, all those extra steps are worth it to me.
And then I also remember at the last crime briefing, you guys had talked about how thefts at liquor stores was up by a ton. I didn't see that in this presentation. Is that something that's still going on?
Yes, it is. At our ABC stores, it's always a challenge. We've tried to think outside the box on how we can work with ABC to design the stores to make it more difficult to steal things. And if you follow our social media, we're putting their faces on there under the liquor lifters little slides that are actually really popular. But we get a lot of tips on that. And it's something that we share with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office as far as the understanding that this is what's driving our crime right now, this, motor vehicle thefts and theft from motor vehicles. And while everyone in Richmond, every chief is judged upon the homicide rate. That is the most, and obviously for good reason, that's the most important thing. But the odds of a Richmonder being the victim of a homicide is relatively low. The odds of walking out one morning and finding your car window smashed, or even having to pay higher prices at the ABC stores because of shoplifting affects all of us and affects many more people. So those are what makes the perception of crime feel worse. One of the things when I talked about, we can go back to this, when we look at this slide, I don't think anyone in Richmond would think that's not on here. Where are we at? All right, well, it's the slide, and we can provide all this to you guys later, but it's the threshold slide where we talk about violent crime. Who would have thought in 2019 that we had 343 violent crimes during that same period, and that 2023 would be the lowest for violent crime in the last 7 years? Nobody would assume that because they don't feel it. Now, part of that is because, the media, when you view it on social media, it just feels like it's everywhere, but the hard data, I think, tells the tale when it comes to things like this. And I think it's really important for us to just keep pushing that message so that people understand that you have to look at data to determine where you stand, not what the latest crazy thing you see on social media shows.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
Also, to clear up, I think a lot of people might have the misconception that Operation Safe Summer kind of is to focus on youths and the teens. This is clearly something that's impacting the whole city. You guys are working
Yes.
on lowering it everywhere, right?
Absolutely, and I know gun violence with our youth is very concerning, but when we look at the average Richmond murder victim, it's not a teenager, it's someone in their 30s. And the majority of those motives that we know about are interpersonal disputes. And the same trend holds true for our non-fatal shootings. While there's certainly incidents involving the drug trade, there's certainly gang violence, there's certainly other things, the majority when we look at it is interpersonal disputes. And this year, another trend it's a bit concerning is our domestic violence aggravated assaults are up. You know, we look at those numbers, you know, what it tells us about what's happening in our city right now is concerning.
So when you look at those numbers for the summer, it looks like the summer was a lot safer than the rest of the year in terms of some violent crimes. And it's striking that the last 5 days there was 5 homicides. That's outside of the safe summer, right? Because you had the safe summer on October 8th, and those were previous. The numbers were a little different. I just want to get a sense of did something stop on September 8th that maybe we should continue so that we are safer overall? I mean, the homicides that came right after that seem to ask
Well,
that question.
Luca, it's definitely not lost on us that, you know, that time period. But I would just say that when we look at these crimes, it's important to look at it over the course of time. But when you spread it out and look at the time, you look at the numbers, you see that we can't just jump every time there's a specific spike. Otherwise, we'd be chasing our tails everywhere. That's why, you know, I've spoken about the micro hotspots in our city, breaking it down, figuring out where historically our violent crime tends to take place and putting resources there. I think that's a better plan than this. But that's not to say that we won't ask for help from our partners in the state police. And I mentioned it, but I really have to thank them because the state police and our federal partners are not fully staffed either in many instances. And the fact that they were willing to come and work with us in the summer is so meaningful to me because it's been years since we've had that partnership. And I know that our officers benefit from their experience, and I'd like to think that the troopers and the special agents and those federal agencies benefit from our officers who are in the focused mission team. There's different skill sets. They're all good guys and gals with a public safety mission, but we have different specialties. And so I think I'm going to be calling Colonel Settle again and asking for more help in the future. So, but it wasn't lost on us. We see.
One quick follow-up on the buyback program. I was struck that on one slide of the locks of switches that are serious threat to mentioning, they cause more deaths and shooting. And then we jump to the buyback, and there's a picture of a bunch of what look like hunting rifles. So I guess my question here is, are the buybacks working to get the guns that are most dangerous off the street, or are you sometimes finding that you're getting older, less likely to be fertile type guns in the buybacks?
Well, I want to be clear. It's just a piece of the puzzle. So nobody thinks that, you know, the hardcore guys that are out there who committed such chaos over the last week in our city are going to say, I'm going to turn in my gun for $250. What I think is it's part of an overall strategy. And every one of those guns, I like to think that every gun has a story. And the story ends when it ends up in the hands of the Richmond Police Department. So that gun, those 250 guns that we seize will never be picked up by a toddler used to kill themselves. It will never be found by a grandson who finds his grandfather's shotgun and decides to take it into one of our schools. So I'm under no illusions that the hardcore individuals in our city are going to just turn in their guns for a bit of money. But like I said, it's just part of the overarching strategy. And when we look at that, and even when we look at the number of guns the men and women behind you took off of our streets, you know, as many of you know, I'm a former homicide detective. One of my cases that I think about a lot is the Michael Brown case at Club Aurora. And Michael was at his 19th birthday with some of his friends at Club Aurora, and he steps on someone's shoe in the club, and they get into a fight. And his group and this group led by a man named Willie Seward get into this argument. They're separated by staff. Willie Seward drives to the west end of Richmond, picks up a gun from a friend of his, drives back to the location, sees Michael and his friends, and from about 50 yards away, he fires at him with a gun he'd never touched before and hits Michael in the head and kills him. And that case always bothered me because Michael's father died 2 months later from the stress of that case, we believe. He had a stroke and passed away at the same hospital his son was taken to. And I found myself, and we ended up solving that case and getting to a successful conclusion, but I found myself wishing that some cop had seen Willie Seward on the way to him coming back with that gun in his car and would have arrested him. And that gun, and that night, and that murder never happens that way again. They didn't know each other, so it never happens. And ironically, when I sat in court with Willie Seward and he's begging for mercy, he's begging Michael's mother to forgive him, and he's crying, and I know at that moment he wishes some cop had stopped him and taken that gun off of him and arrested him before he killed Michael Brown. And there's some murders that we're never going to stop. They're going to happen when people find each other and they're going to put themselves in that position to kill someone, but there's so many of ours that are dependent upon chance and luck, and those are the ones that we can intervene in. So whether it's a gun buyback and we take that gun and end that story for that gun, or whether it's a traffic stop that ends with the seizure of the gun and that murder that was going to happen just never happens, I think the story of those guns ending is an important part of our strategy. All right, I think that's it. Thank you all